So, welcome everyone to OneShul. My name is Patrick Olive. I am the Executive Director of PunkTorah, which is the organization of which OneShul is a part of. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to independent Jewish spirituality, learning, and community. And I'm absolutely grateful that you're here. Really, it's the community that makes up who we are. It's you. You are the reason why OneShul is here. We're a pluralistic community, so we're not part of any particular denomination or movement. We just want people to come together to celebrate Jewish learning, to celebrate holidays and events, and to have the kind of open, borderless, dynamic community that Kalal Yisrael is supposed to be. We are open to everyone, and we're constantly trying to improve ourselves so that we can be better for everyone. So if you have any suggestions, if you're interested in leading in the community, send an email to me, patrick@punktorah.org. Again, that is Patrick, Patrick, at punktorah.org. And let me know what you think. Friend me on Facebook. If you're in the chat room, you can click on my name and friend me on Facebook. Because I'd love to get to know you. I'd love to know how we can make this community better. So, this week's Torah portion is Parshat Pinchas. It's in the book of Numbers. And what I want to do is I want to, first of all, make sure that everyone can see me okay. So, in the chat room, if someone would let me know if you see me okay, can you hear me okay? Let me know if you're having any problems. I really appreciate it when there's lots of feedback. And a few rules for this class. There are no rules. Feel free to ask questions, to interrupt at any time, to make your own comments, whatever the case may be. This is not a sit back and be quiet type of thing. This is an interactive thing. It's like Passover with your family. Yell and scream and get in fights or whatever you want to do, right? Okay, so let's get started. So, Parshat Pinchas. So, I want to start with a premise, and I want to see if everyone agrees with me on this premise. So, the premise is that the Bible, or the Torah, if we want to just talk about the Torah, or all of Jewish literature, the Bible often has conflicting moral messages. Conflicting moral messages. And our goal as Jews is to figure out what the message is so that we can live the moral message correctly. So I'm going to say it one more time. The Bible often has conflicting moral messages. Our goal as Jews is to figure out what the message is so that we can live the moral message correctly. Does everyone agree with that? Is there anyone who disagrees? Does anyone think that the Jewish tradition, in terms of our written works, is consistent, that it's constantly giving the same moral message? Or do we all agree that there are conflicts within the text in terms of what it means to be morally good? Give everyone a second to respond to that, because I know that that's a lot. We're going to unpack that. I mean, that's the purpose of the class tonight. But I want to see what everyone's kind of immediate thought is, and there are no right or wrong answers to this. But do we all seem to think that the Torah specifically has a consistent moral message? So Michael says, not so sure. Rivka says there are conflicts. Leah says constantly reinterpreted for the times. Okay, so perhaps the moral message is constantly reinterpreted, so that's how that works. Sarah McCulloch, I believe this is the first time we've seen each other, Sarah, so welcome to OneShul. Wouldn't you say that it has consistent moral messages? Let's see. Almost lost you there. Wouldn't you say that it has consistent moral messages for specific situations? The Torah just doesn't specify those situations, and that's why we have to study. Okay, so let me kind of say that in a different way, that there's a consistent moral message for certain things that happen. So there are certain rules we're supposed to follow at certain times. The problem is that the Torah doesn't cover every single situation that can happen, so we have to interpret based on some sort of like precedent. It's kind of like interpreting the law. And so that's where the Talmudic sort of inspiration comes from. Moshe Del Rio, who I haven't seen in a while. Good to see you, Moshe. There are definitely conflicts between what would seem to be the moral position as presented by different characters. Okay, so even the characters in the Jewish tradition have behaved in different ways, and in some ways it seems like it's good, in other ways it seems it's bad. George says the message is interpreted anew with each generation as the story is told and our understanding is enlightened. So George's perspective here is that maybe it's getting better over time. Maybe we have the truth, we have Torah truth, Torah knowledge, and we're somehow getting smarter at it. We're getting better at understanding it as time goes by. Okay, so these are all terrific ideas. But I think we can all agree then that there are conflicting moral messages. Now, there are different ways that we can sort of work through that, but it seems like everyone kind of agrees that if you just take things on face value, there is conflict. So, I think we should start there. So, what I want to talk about is a method that is used to analyze Torah. It's called the Pardes method. So Pardes stands for Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. Okay? So Pshat is the literal meaning. So you look at the text, it literally says something like, thou shalt not, fill in the blank. And that's the literal interpretation. Remez is metaphorical. So metaphorical has to do with, what is it saying, and then what does it sort of mean on top of that? That things that happen aren't literal things that are happening necessarily, that, X and Y aren't necessarily X and Y. X and Y are just characters that represent something else, okay? So that's one way of looking at it. Drush is the contextual. So that's where we look at the Midrash and we look at all of these other things. We look at a line in context of everything else, and we try to develop an interpretation based on that. And the final, which is Sod, is sort of the secret, the hidden, the esoteric, right? So an example of Sod is, it says 3 times in the Torah, you shouldn't boil a kid in the mother's milk. The Sod interpretation, the esoteric interpretation, is that we are supposed to keep meat and milk separate, okay? So when you put PRDS together, Pardes. Pshat, Remez, Drush, Sod. Pardes. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this Pardes method. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 pieces of text from this week's Torah portion, and we're going to try to analyze it from these different perspectives. So I'm going to go on ahead and read. We're going to start with Numbers 25:10. Is everyone with me? Does everyone get where we're going with this? Pardes, interpretations, any questions, comments, concerns? John's online. Welcome, John. Good to see you, man. It's been forever. Okay. So we're all together on this Pardes thing. Okay. So, Numbers 25:10. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, hath turned my wrath away from the children of Israel, and that he was very jealous for my sake among them, so that I consumed not the children of Israel in my jealousy. Okay, now that sounds really strange, and it doesn't really make any sense. Really, if we were writing that line today, it would actually be at the end of this paragraph that we're reading, because basically it's God talking about something that has happened. We know it involves this Phinehas guy. We know that Phinehas is the son of Eleazar, who is the son of he's the son of Aaron. So we know something's happened here. There's this wrath situation. There's jealousy for the sake of God. And there was this situation where the children of Israel might have been consumed. But this Pinchas guy has somehow solved this issue. Okay, so this is kind of like foreshadowing. Or not foreshadowing. We're sort of being told something before we need to be told it. Okay. So now it says, Behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace, and it shall be unto him and to his seed after him the covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was jealous for his God and made an atonement for the children of Israel. Okay, so now we're being told, okay, this Pinchas guy, he's done something. The children of Israel, we're going to have something happen to them because he sort of saved the day, because he took on this responsibility of nipping this issue in the bud. He now has this covenant of peace. Okay, well, we still haven't been told what's happened yet, but it's being kind of built up, right? Something big has happened here. And it's so big that this one particular character is now being given a covenant of peace, or some people have translated it to be the medal of peace, like he's given like a badge. So here's what it says, Numbers 25:14. Now the name of the man of Israel that was slain, who was slain with the Midianite woman, was Zimri, the son of Salu, a prince of a father's house among the Simeonites. And the name of the Midianite woman that was slain was Cosbi, the daughter of Zur. He was head of the people of a father's house in Midian. Okay, so here's what has happened. This prince has engaged in a sexual act with this Midianite woman. And so what has happened is that Pinchas has decided to sort of go Batman on the situation. He has decided to be a vigilante, and he has killed both of them. Now, what we are told in the Jewish tradition is that the Midianite woman was trying to use basically provocative behavior in order to convince this prince to then convince everyone else to get involved in Baal worship. So this has to do with idolatry. That's why there's all this talk about jealousy for God. So jealousy for God means, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. Here's all these people who are potentially going to be practicing these idolatrous behaviors, right? And so Pinchas decides to become the neighborhood watch guy of the Hebrew settlement, and he sees this behavior going on. It is sort of understood that what was going on was basically a ritualistic sexual activity having to do with the worship of this Midianite god. And so Pinchas freaks out as sort of the self-proclaimed defender of the faith, and he kills them both. Okay, so this is what has happened, and we're told from the start of this portion of Numbers, that this Pinchas character deserves a reward, basically. He deserves this covenant of peace because he has slain the Midianite woman. So what is the literal message of this story? Does anyone have a sense of what the literal message is? And I'll recap for you. Pinchas, the vigilante, kills the son of kills a prince and kills a Midianite woman because they were engaging in lewd behavior that was part of an idolatrous practice. So it's not only lewd behavior, but it's actually idolatrous lewd behavior. So, and God, because of this heroic deed on behalf of Pinchas, he's given this shalom, this covenant of peace. So what's the literal message here? What's the just glaring obvious thing? You don't even have to think about it. Does anyone know? What's the just sort of, we're not going to get all Rashi about this. We're not going to get all complicated and, trying to analyze it from all these different perspectives. What's the literal thing? Okay, Jared, welcome Jared. Idolatry is bad. Moshe says when you engage in lewd behavior, do not engage in idol worship. Okay, so idolatry, lewd behavior, more idolatry. Anyone else? So George says taking action for God. So that's a little bit more abstract, but yeah. Taking action for God. Okay. So Leah says death to idolaters. Okay, so death to idolaters and death to anyone who practices anything that has to do with idolatry. Okay, so that is the absolute literal interpretation. Okay, so pretty severe, right? Let's now take this a step up and let's kind of go in the direction that George was going in. What's a metaphorical message that we could draw from this? So let's think about things a little bit differently. Who could these people sort of be? So who do they represent? So Pinchas represents sort of the Jewish people, okay? The prince, whose name I just forgot off the top of my head, Zimri. Zimri represents Zimri represents the Israelite people in a position of power, right? Okay, because he's the prince of the father's house of the Simeonites. Okay, so he's kind of a soon-to-be important guy. He's a piece of what we might call royalty. Okay, the Midianite woman, perhaps she represents the Midianites. Okay, so if we take it above a level from the individual, right? So the individual literal message is the Midianite woman deserves to die. That's the literal direct message. So now let's take it a step above that. And instead of talking about Pinchas and the Midianite woman and Zimri, instead of talking about these individual people, let's talk about something in a little bit of a broader and more metaphorical way. Does anyone have any sense for what that could be? Could perhaps politics be a part of this? Could these people be metaphors for the politics of the time? We already kind of, got on it. Death to idolaters is part of it. Leah says death to competing religious power bases. Okay, great. So now we're going down this metaphorical direction. So all of these people aren't literal people. I mean, maybe they are literal people in the story, but perhaps they represent something else. So it's the idea that, there are these different seats of power. Moshe says, do not fail to be critical of faithlessness, even if the target of your criticism is a noteworthy leader. Okay, great. So this son is noteworthy, and he represents possibly the fallen people, the people who are moving their way into idolatry. So even they, as people in power, are responsible. Michael mentions assimilation. Okay, so here's this competing behavior that goes against God's Torah, and we should not compete. We should not get involved with anything that assimilates us to that, and that it is okay to react harshly in that situation. George says Israel's God is the true God of the three groups. Okay, so that's another great metaphor. So we've got some interesting metaphors here. Again, still pretty harsh stuff though, right? I mean, this is not the sort of universalistic things that we in the Jewish community would like to think of ourselves as, right? So let's now look at this contextually. So what we're going to do now is we've taken the literal message where we talked about Zimri and the Midianite woman and Pinchas, okay? Then we raised them up and we said, okay, These are not individuals. These are these people are something metaphorical. So now let's look at a contextual message. So let's look at this Torah portion and this one line, or I should say this one paragraph within the Torah portion, and let's expand it out a little bit further. So, my argument that I would use for this is that the collective Israel must defend itself against the temptation to stop serving God. And the reason why I made that assumption is that if you look in this Torah portion, the name Korach is mentioned. So Korach was the sort of rebellious leader who tried to overthrow Moses and Aaron. Okay? So this idea that, an individual who thinks that they are important, a person who is self-righteous, must be fought against because they're ultimately trying to lead you away from God. Okay, so that's another thing. The other reason why I drew that conclusion is that in this Torah portion, we also learn about the holidays and the sacrifices. So we infer something from the text that surrounds it. So does anyone have an inference, something that they see this particular paragraph in context to everything else that is either in this Torah portion or in something else? So now we're looking at this particular paragraph and our interpretation of this paragraph in terms of everything else in the literature. Let's look at what surrounds it, what's influenced by it, and then that's how we're able to come up with an answer. Does anyone have a sense for what that could be? So we had, as an example, the Korach issue. We had Balak, Parshat Balak. So we had the magician, Balaam, trying to put a curse on the Hebrews. So that involved Midianites. Okay, so perhaps there's something we can draw from there. We are about to enter into the Promised Land. We're about to see Joshua being given his role as the new leader of the Jewish people. Any other thoughts about how we could see this particular paragraph, this story about the Hebrew characters and the Midianite characters in the context of the bigger literature? Because another way that I would look at it would be that we are being warned about what's to come, that this is foreshadowing. And if you look at Deuteronomy is basically just a retelling of all of these things. It's Moses giving a final warning. George says the constant struggle between Israel and the false gods around them, a constant tension before and after entering the land. Great, okay, bingo. So that's a contextual way of looking at it. Here's something that's really esoteric. This is the Sod method. So if you look at the Torah, when it's written in a scroll, a Sefer Torah, there are no period marks. There's no division in terms of parsha. That is a book thing. That's not how the Torah was written down. It's one long story, one long piece of text. So there's a secret message, some people say. The letter Yud in Pinchas's name is drawn a little bit smaller than other Yuds that you would see in the rest of the text. So if you think about it like fonts, so let's say the Torah is normally a 16-point font, so Yud would be 13 or 12 or something, right? It's a little bit smaller. This smaller Yod shows that when we commit violence, even for the sake of goodness, something inside us diminishes. Okay, so that is a sort of a secret interpretation. So, Do you feel after reading this chapter, or I should say this paragraph, that you have gotten any closer to a sense of what God really wants from us? We've analyzed this one paragraph 4 different ways. There's actually even more levels that we could study it on. The fear of God is another level, and there's all kinds of other ways that people have tried to interpret Torah. But, do you feel like you've gotten any closer now? This is feedback time. What does everyone think? Have we gotten closer? We've gotten closer to understanding what God actually wants. We've looked at it 4 different ways: literal, contextual, metaphorical, and esoteric. What does everyone think? Are we closer to a sense now of, now I understand what's going on in the world and all of that good stuff? And so Moshe says vigilance regarding love of God without being a vigilante. Okay. John says almost. Okay. So we have a few people who seem to be a little more enlightened, at least, than I am, because I'll tell you, I have no clue. Right? We've read one paragraph. We've read this one paragraph 4 different ways, and I still don't know what God wants from me, right? I don't know if God wants me to not commit violence because it diminishes part of me. I don't know if I'm supposed to defend myself and everyone in the collective Israel against the temptation to stop serving God. Even if that includes killing someone. I don't know if perhaps this is just a literal thing that's in stone where Phineas is given this covenant of shalom and it maybe doesn't even affect me. Maybe it was really just about Phineas and not about myself. I don't know. I'm not any closer after this. So I don't know. George says, I agree, God wants shalom without a shalom award given to us. Okay. So, great point. So we have a guest here who said, an aside, I missed part of this, but you spoke about the smaller yud. Did you reference the broken vav? No, I actually didn't mention the broken vav. I only mentioned the smaller yud. So there is another interpretation that has to do with the vav being broken. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head what that interpretation is. Guest 944, if you would like to quickly, or not even quickly, take your time, clue us in on what that is. I don't remember exactly what that sort of secret, esoteric interpretation is. But I would love it if you would share that with us. So, John, George, and Moshe, John, George, and Moshe are incredibly smarter than I am. They're getting closer to this whole what does God want from us thing. I'm totally clueless, and I'm the one teaching the class. So maybe it's not enough to just study this one particular Torah portion, this one particular paragraph from the Torah portion. Maybe we need to look for more. So let's move on a couple chapters ahead. We're now at Numbers 27, verse 1. So this is about Zelophehad's daughters. Okay? Then drew near the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh. Of the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. And these are the names of the daughters. Okay, so we're already being told, so here's these daughters of a guy named Zelophehad. We don't really know anything about him yet, but we know that he can trace his lineage, or the daughters can trace their lineage, all the way back to Joseph. Okay, so this is a family that has some prominence. And they stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest and before the princes and all the congregation at the door of the tent of meeting. Okay, so they're at the Mishkan. So this is a big deal, right? These 5 daughters are talking in front of the temple. Our father died in the wilderness, and he was not among the company of them that gathered themselves against the Lord in the company of Korach. Okay, so we talked about Korach a second ago. I said that there was an interpretation based on Korach in the previous paragraph, well, this is where that comes from. So this Zelophehad guy dies in the wilderness, but he had nothing to do with the Korach thing. He died in his own sin, and he had no sons. Okay, so they are the only children of this Zelophehad guy, who all we know about him is that he comes from all the way to Joseph. Why should the name of our father be done away from among his family, because he had no son? Give unto us a possession among the brethren of our father. So what is basically going on here is that Zelophehad's daughters are frustrated about the fact that their father died and they don't have a brother, so all of the inheritance is going to go to their uncles, basically. And this is unfair. It's unjust. They're saying, why should our father's name be wiped out because he didn't have a son? Which is sort of a fancy way of saying, why should we... Why, because we are women, do we not deserve to be a part of the inheritance, the law of inheritance? So that's basically the claim that they stake. So God and Moses decide to bro down at the Mishkan, and the conversation goes something like this. The daughters of Zelophehad speak right. Thou shalt surely give them a possession of an inheritance among their father's brethren, and thou shalt cause the inheritance of their father to pass unto them. And thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a man dies and have no son, then ye shall cause his inheritance to pass unto his daughters. And if he has no daughter, then ye shall give his inheritance unto his brethren. And if ye have no brethren, then ye shall give his inheritance unto his father's brethren. And if his father has no brethren, then ye shall give his inheritance unto his kinsman that is next to him of his family, and he shall possess it. Okay, so we're being told what the laws of inheritance are, and if there is no son, then the girls go next. Okay, so this is pretty cool, actually, right? Because what this presumes is that there was no law before that gave the women the right that the non-existent son would have had, or that the uncles would have had, right? And so there's this conversation between God and Moses, and God says, you know what? They're right. The women are right. Here's the way we need to have this law work. Okay, so let's go through the Pardes method on this one. What is the very literal message of this paragraph? The absolute, not even thinking message. And while you're coming up with that, I'm going to read what Guest 994 says. Talking about the broken vav. So this was the last portion, or last part we were reading about. The definition of shalom is wholeness. The broken vav... Whoops. I lost what I was reading there. Okay. The broken vav indicates how difficult it is to achieve this, or that at times things may appear whole but are still defective. Perhaps speaks to difficulty in achieving moral clarity we are trying to focus on. Okay? Beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. Let's look at what some people are saying here. What is the absolute literal message? George says Torah suffrage. Okay, so talking about the suffrage and suffragettes. The suffrage is the right to vote. Michael says, doesn't this suggest that if you want rights, you must speak up for them? You must speak to be heard. Okay, you guys are way too metaphorical about this. You're getting way too deep. What's the absolute literal message? Don't even have to think about it. We read it, it literally says it, and I spoke it. What's the absolute literal message of what we just read? Does anyone know? Moshe gets it. Moshe got it. Daughters should have the right to inheritance. That's all it is. That's all this tells us. It doesn't tell us anything else. There's nothing deeper than that. It just says the daughters were right, and it says you get an inheritance. That's the simple, plain, literal meaning. Okay, so now we'll go one step further and we'll say metaphorical. So what do we have going on here? Who do all of these people sort of represent? Okay, so we have the daughters of Zelophehad, so they are the inheritors of the future. Okay, we have God, who is the lawgiver. We have Moses, who is the prophet. Okay, and the prophet is acting on behalf of God and on behalf of people. And what is the transaction that happens here? The people speak to the prophet speaks to God, God speaks back to the prophet, and the law is changed. So what would be a metaphorical meaning here? So Michael said something about how if you want your rights, you have to speak up for them. You have to speak up to be heard, so you have to be counted for. Okay. Any other kind of metaphorical ways of looking at this? So I would think that some possibilities would include the idea of equality between the sexes, at least in a certain kind of way. It could be that God is amenable to human need. Okay, that's a possibility. It could be that human beings have the right to interpret Torah law. Law can change over time. God's morality is rooted in a sense of tribal justice. Any other kind of metaphorical ways of looking at it? Moshe says if tradition does not serve the people, the tradition is subject to amendment. Okay, so that's another sort of metaphorical way of looking at it. That's taking this Torah portion and looking at it in terms of the future, right? Because the daughters represent the future. They're going to marry and have children, and there will be inheritances after that. George makes the point that women, including Jewish women, could not inherit property in the U.S. until women got the right to vote. So, okay, so we have a lot of interesting metaphors here. So now let's take an even further step back. So we started with the literal, so that's us really on top of the characters. Then we went metaphorical, and we said, who do these characters represent? Okay, now let's go contextual. Let's look big, big, big picture, right? Okay, and let's look at everything that we've seen here. So we've seen this Zelophehad stuff. We've seen this Midianite stuff happen. In the next part of the Torah portion, we're going to find out more about festivals and sacrifices. Let's see what else happened. There was not only the sort of vigilante justice, but there was a justice before all of this where a man was executed for violating Shabbat. Okay, so maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe Joshua has something to do with it. Let's look at everything contextually. What does everyone grab from there? So it could be, as George is saying, that the Torah is trying fairness, okay? So there are certain things that are fair and certain things that aren't, okay? So this is one kind of fairness. You know, inheritance, the fairness of inheritance is one that is more equal, and perhaps there is a fairness to what Zimri deserved. He deserved to be killed along with the Midianite princess. Okay, so that's a possibility. Michael says there's a lot of punishment happening. Okay, so perhaps there's something there. The Zelophehad's daughters were not punished for anything. You know, they weren't punished for being female. So perhaps in a contextual way, what we learn is that sin, in a sense of punishment, in a sense of what's fair, only comes when you do something intentionally. The daughters weren't intentionally born female, right? They weren't intentionally exempt from the laws of inheritance, so it was unfair that they deserved some kind of citation, right? They didn't deserve to be treated unfairly, whereas perhaps Balaam deserved to be treated unfairly from his perspective. Perhaps Korach deserved to be treated unfairly from his perspective. So this is great. So there's this bigger context where we're learning that certain things happen at certain times. It may not seem fair to us, but in this case, if you do something, you deserve whatever happens to you as a result of it. If you didn't do something, if you played no part in it, hey, it's not your fault, and maybe even God will side with you if your case is just. So that's what we learn when we, take an even bigger step back. Let's look at things on a very mystical level. So Reb Zalman says, in the Messianic era, there will be no distinction in status between men and women. So that is his perspective, that's what the secret message is here, and that you think of these women as being the future. They represent the future because they are the seed of the future. Matter of fact, Jewish identity used to be tied up in who the father was. In today's rabbinic Judaism, it's tied up in who the mother is. So perhaps, the distinctions in status, this is one step in the breaking down of statuses. Layla says, Zelophehad's daughters weren't men. Using male as the standard needs to go. Okay, so that's another great way of looking at it. The guest 944 says, one man's punishment is another man's justice. Okay, very interesting. Moshe says women hold a great deal of power and they should discharge their power responsibly and should be protected by society. Okay, so we think of the Midianite princess, right? I mean, she used her seductive power in a certain way, and from a Torah Judaism perspective, that was irresponsible. Now, I mean, she was a Midianite. She wasn't responsible to God, but, it brings up a great point. Okay, so now I'm going to ask the question again. Do you feel like now we've studied 2 parts of this week's Torah portion? We've studied it each 4 different ways. So basically we've done 8 Torah studies in about 40 minutes. Okay? If you think about it that way, 8 Torah studies in 40 minutes. That's the world's record for the most Torah studies in one sitting. Do you now feel like you know what God wants from you? I'll take it back to where we were before, our premise that we started with. The Bible often has conflicting moral messages. Our goal as Jews is to figure out what the message is so that we can live the moral message correctly. So, do you feel that now you could live the moral message correctly? So, guest 944 is talking about the idea that, wouldn't it be great if we could ask more questions of God about things that are difficult to understand? Absolutely. I completely agree. George says that the allegorical message has more meaning to him. Okay. So we have, we looks like we're starting to kind of get some different kinds of answers here. Some that are saying, well, I wish I knew more. George here is saying, well, the allegorical, the metaphorical, has more meaning. Okay, we don't necessarily know anymore, it just has more meaning. But again, I'm going to bring us back to our original premise, right? The premise that we were talking about, which is that our goal as Jews is to figure out what the message is so that we can live correctly. If we don't know what the message is, we don't know what to do, right? I mean, there's very strict laws in the Torah. Here's how you offer the sacrifice. Okay, if we don't know how to offer the sacrifice, we can't offer the sacrifice. And then there's some form of citation, right? It says keep the Shabbat. But it doesn't tell us how to keep the Shabbat other than don't pick up sticks and don't light a fire, right? Now, I have yet to pick up sticks on Shabbat ever, and to the best of my knowledge, I don't think I've ever lit a fire. But I have lit Shabbat candles, which might be a fire, right? So this is where all this kind of Talmudic stuff comes from. It's this, oh my gosh, like, what do I do with this? George says this passage has a lot of violence and is somewhere in time, and the message needs to pass over the bridge to meaning for today. Okay, great. I loved all those. I loved that language. That was really good language. But I don't know. I'd love to hear from some more people here. Anne, Jared, Sarah. Let's hear from some more people. What do you think? Do you now have a sense? And you know what? Just saying yes or no is a good enough answer. Do you have a sense now that you know what God wants? You know, that was the whole goal, right? That's why I named the class, What Does God Want From Us? Do you have a sense that you now know what God wants from us, from the sort of 8 Torah studies that we've done all in one shot? Sarah says it's probably easier to ask. Anne says, I'm having a hard time. Yeah, Michael asks, we must think? Yeah, you have to think, unfortunately. Leah says, yes, I see a direction. There's a bias towards thinking of God as male. Bet money, the Midianites worshipped a female god. Refinement via Zelophehad's daughters, etc., is trying to bring women back into the equation. Okay? And so, Leah, I would ask you, does that then give you a sense of what God wants you to do with your life? Because that's what it's all about, right? I mean, we can read this the way that we would read, like, Moby Dick, right? Or Charles Dickens, you know. We could read that and we could really just textually and analyze it, but at the end of the day, it's like, what do we do with it? What does God want from us? Yes, Sarah, from these 2 passages and from the fact that we've studied each of them 4 different ways, do you have a sense of what God wants? So Leah says yes. Okay, so we've got one person who knows what's going on, right? And this is out of somewhere between 12 to 25 people who are in this classroom right now. And guess what? The answer, I don't know, is just as good as an answer, right? Like, that's what I've been saying this whole time. I don't know. And I don't know is probably the best answer you can ever give to anything. Because it's the one that doesn't force you into a situation that you can't work your way out of. So, you know, here's what I'll say about this. Because perhaps everybody is just kind of burned out about the whole question. You know, what does God want from us? I think what we've found tonight, from looking at all of the different ways that we've interpreted all of this stuff, and the fact that, you know, almost an hour into this, only 1 out of 25 of us, that's 4%. So 4% of the class has a sense of what this is really about. And Leah's even saying it may change next year. So that's like a conditional knowledge, right? Okay? So we'll say that that's a 50-50 chance. So there's a 50-50 chance that 4% of this class, right? 4%, between 4 to 8% of this class knows what God wants from us. This is God's Torah, right? This is supposed to be the message of like what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to live our lives. And we've studied it 8 different ways. 4 different ways times 2. We still are kind of not sure, right? So here's kind of my way of looking at this. What does God want from us? God wants our commentary. God wants our commentary. What have we done tonight? We've talked. It's all we've done is talked. And we maybe came up with the right answer. Maybe we came up with the wrong one. Maybe, as Leah says, in a year we'll come up with a different one. As George said, we'll maybe get smarter and smarter. Thousands and thousands of years from now, we'll understand what all of this is about. But God wants our commentary. Zelophehad's daughters gave a commentary. The commentary was justice. Phineas gave a commentary. It was a very nasty commentary. It was a deadly commentary, but he gave a commentary. God wants our commentary. And at the end of this Torah portion, which everyone's going to read after this class is over with, we learn about the holidays and the sacrifices for those holidays, what you're supposed to do on those holidays. And what have we done with those holidays? We've built traditions into them, some of which aren't even in the Torah, some of which aren't in the Talmud, some of which we just did because maybe that was the country we were in at the time, right? God wants our commentary. Our commentary is the way we feel about the text. It's the way we live our lives. It's our way of approaching it. God wants our commentary. And I think eventually we'll arrive at the right answer, which may be different over time. That's my answer. God wants our commentary. So, that's what I have to say about that. So, a few announcements. We were supposed to have a class this Wednesday on the book of Joshua. Unfortunately, Rachel Esther is sick and is not going to be able to. I think she's sick at least. She's either sick or she has some conflict that happened, and is not going to be able to teach the class. So this is the only class we have for this week. We do have more stuff coming up next week. We're looking for more people who are interested in teaching classes and leading Torah study and teaching other kinds of classes, leading services, whether it's daytime services, evening services, Shabbat classes, Havdalah. There's all kinds of different things you can do. We have a lot of other great stuff coming up. We've got some books that are coming out. We are working right now on trying to find a way to make our live streaming closed captioned. So if someone is kind of a tech person and wants to help us figure that out, that would be fantastic. We are also working on grant writing, so if you know of some grants that are coming up that maybe we could write to that would help us and help the community, that would be fantastic. All you got to do is send me an email, patrick@punktorah.org, and help us to figure out, how we can be supporting ourselves. Which leads me to my next point. It costs $110 a month to run OneShul. I want you to think about that for a minute. $110 to run OneShul. So that's the cost of the viewing window, the streaming, and it's the cost of the chat room. Okay? Tell me of one other synagogue in the entire universe. We're going to pretend there's like Jews out in galaxies far, far away. Tell me of a synagogue anywhere in the world that anyone can go to at any time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for free, that operates on $110 a month. There isn't one. We are the only one. And we will only exist if you support us. So if you take the number of classes that we do and the number of prayer services and you divide it by the cost of running OneShul, this class cost us about $30. Okay? So here's what I want you to do. There's 10 people, 11 people who are in the chat room right now. I want you to all give $30. I want you right now to give $30. It's a tax deduction because we are a non-profit religious educational organization, so kudos, we all get a tax deduction. That's nice. But really, it's about being a community. There are people who don't have access to Judaism. I get emails from people in foreign countries, some of which are hostile towards Jews. who, because of OneShul, because of our videos, because of our OneShul chat room, because of our live prayer services, because of our recorded services, our library, our memorial wall, our prayer request wall, they have Judaism. You right now have a moral responsibility to help Jews to have Judaism. This community exists so that you and everyone else in the community can have a Jewish life. I want you to give $30 to support this community. And I want you to do it because we have a covenant. We have a covenant with God that we're going to do it. We have a covenant with each other that we're going to do it. And we have a covenant not just with this community, right? Not just with the 12 people that are in the chat room right now, but with the millions and millions of Jewish people around the world. And frankly, the millions and millions of people who are going to become Jewish, right? We have a responsibility to those people. We need to help them. We need to keep this community together and strong and growing. I want to see a time where every single day we have Shachrit, Mincha, and Mariv services and a class. And every Shabbat evening we have Kabbalat Shabbat, and every Saturday morning we have a Torah reading. I want those things. This is my community. I want those things. If you believe in this, then I want you to give $30. So I want you to click here. You can go above, click on the donation button that I have in there, and you can support. $30. Sarah asked the question, why don't we have these things? Because we need you to volunteer. Because we need the financial resources to do it. Because we need you. If you want to see these things happen, give a donation. If you want to see these events happen, volunteer to make these events happen, right? This is not shopping. This isn't you give me some money, or you give Ketzira some money, or you give Rachel Esther some money, or you give Rivka some money, and then you get a product in return, right? This is a community. It's not about that donation, although the donation helps a lot. It's about what you personally put into it. I work for you, right? I work for you. You are my boss. And you vote with your dollars, and you vote with your time. So make a vote for the Jewish community. Make a vote for pluralism. Make a vote for deaf Jews, for blind Jews, for converts, for LGBT people, for homebound people. Make a donation for Jewish families that are in the military. Make a donation for people who don't have community, because they are your community members. If you have any questions, you can always email me. Again, my email address is patrick@punktorah.org. If you are not the kind of person who is comfortable giving a donation online, or you don't really email that much, you can also write me a letter. You can give a donation via snail mail. All of that information is here on the OneShul website. And of course, I would love it if you would volunteer, teach a class, lead a service. That's what we're here to do. So, once again, thank you so much for coming to OneShul. I have a custom that I stay in the chat room after classes and services just to chat for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. If you want to Skype with me, if you want to talk in the chat room, I would prefer Skype because it's faster than just typing the whole time. But I would love to answer any questions you have about the Torah portion, about OneShul. If this is your first time here, I'd love it if you'd stick around. We can get to know each other. You can click in the chat room on my lovely photo and friend me on Facebook. I'd love to friend you on Facebook. And let's get to know each other. So again, thank you so much for coming to OneShul. Support your community. Support Jews around the world. And we will see you next week. The 16th will be our next event, and it will be another Torah study. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Take care.